Today I want to talk about the brand new Nikon Mirrorless that Nikon teased yesterday on their website. And I'm going to talk about the first serious, well, not many considered them serious, but I did, Nikon mirrorless system from a couple years ago that I expected to hate, but I loved it, and I'm going to share some images with you as a homage to Nikon here in a minute. But Nikon has to get this right. Hey guys, this is Steve Huff from SteveHuffPhoto.com. Welcome back to my channel here on YouTube. Don't forget to go back to SteveHuffPhoto.com when you're done to check out all the articles and reviews there. But today I want to talk about the brand new Nikon Mirrorless that Nikon teased yesterday on their website. The long-rumored Nikon Mirrorless that is rumored to be, if you go to NikonRumors.com, full frame, fast AF, new lens mount, bigger lens mount, need an adapter for your current Nikon lenses, supposed to have super fast autofocus even for video, possibly coming in two flavors, 24 megapixel and then a higher res, kind of like the Sony A7 series. But one thing caught my attention with the Nikon teaser, and I've been looking forward to this announcement for quite a while because I want to see what Nikon, legendary Nikon, is going to do as an answer to challenge Sony. Sony's been riding this mirrorless wave, the full frame wave, for many years, ever since the original A7, and with their latest versions, the A7 III, the A7R III, the A9, they are just skyrocketing past DSLRs. DSLR sales have been falling, and Nikon and Canon have been reluctant to release a really nice pro-level mirrorless because I think they're afraid of hurting their DSLR sales. At least that's the common theory. But this new camera from Nikon looks very interesting, as their teaser makes one thing clear, and I noticed it right off the bat. It looks like, because if you go there, it talks about light, in pursuit of light or something like that. They keep mentioning light, and then they show a low light portrait of a woman. It looks like it was taken in near darkness. They then show the camera in near darkness, like out in the desert, and I've done my best to brighten up some of these photos, which many others have done. I posted some at my website yesterday, but you can kind of get a look at what this body is going to be like. It looks almost A7-ish, but with possibly hoping a better EVF. It looks like a beefier grip. It looks like a little bit cooler of a design than a Sony A7 series. I expect it to be rugged and tough like Nikons usually are when they take a camera seriously. I mean, Nikon's a legend, right? They've been around a long time, and they've let Sony ride that wave. This has to be right. This Nikon has to be as good or better, hopefully better, than the current Sony models in order to really compete, because they're going with a new lens mount. So it's not like people who have all this Nikon glass are going to be like, oh yeah, I could just snap my lens to this new Nikon. You're going to have an adapter, and some people don't like adapters. I have no problem with them, but it's a new lens mount, so who knows what kind of lenses are going to be out when they release the camera. When I saw that big lens mount, I was immediately thinking, well, maybe it's a little bit bigger of a sensor. Maybe it's not full frame. Maybe it's a little bigger, but I doubt that. So it's most likely full frame. If you go by the rumors, it's supposed to, like I said, be built to a high level, be really fast with autofocus, have great fast autofocus with video. I'm not sure about the battery life, possibly 2 different resolutions. But I would always go with the 24 megapixel if it were me, because 98% of people, it seems today, who buy these cameras, they don't print big. They're not making big gallery prints. They mostly share online, and maybe if they're doing weddings, prints for weddings, but you don't need billboard size prints for weddings. So I would always go with the lower megapixel, and I think that's rumored to be coming in at around $3,000, which puts it into A7R III territory. So I'm very anxious to see this camera, especially if it's going to be a low light beast of a camera. If it surpasses the Sony sensors for low light, I'm going to buy one immediately because I shoot a lot in low light. If it has fast autofocus for video, count me in. That's one thing I'm looking for. If this could be an all-in-one camera, a video solution, and a fantastic imaging solution, count me in. I'm also hoping for some fast glass, but imagine mounting the knocked Nikkor to it, the 58 f1.2. It would just feel awesome, I'm sure. I hope there's a nice EVF in that camera. So Canon's rumored to come out with a new Pro mirrorless as well very soon, and I suspect and I predict both of these will be on display at Photokina this year in September. So I expect many people will be playing with them. The hype will be going like crazy, and people are going to have to decide Sony, Canon, or Nikon. I'm not sure what Canon's coming out with, but I'm filming this on an EOS M50. That's another problem. The first gen mirrorless cameras from these manufacturers have always been dodgy. Look at the Sony A7, the very first one. They were slow, clunky, horrible battery life. The focus would miss, it wouldn't lock on right. The first gen Canon EOS M camera was slow and clunky and silly. And I'm going to talk about the first serious, well, not many considered them serious, but I did, Nikon mirrorless system from a couple years ago that I expected to hate, but I loved it. And I'm going to share some images with you as a homage to Nikon here in a minute. But Nikon has to get this right. They can't have it lack in compared to the Sonys in any way, especially if the lower res model, if that's the case, is going to be $3,000. It has to surpass the Sony A7 III. So how are they going to do that? Is it going to be faster in autofocus? Unlikely, but it needs to match it. Is it going to be as good in low light? I hope so, and I hope it's going to be better. Is it going to have better video capabilities? That's a question because the A7 III, many people are using it and loving it for video. Is it going to have better battery? Unlikely. Right now, the Sony A7 III has the best battery life of any mirrorless camera ever created. But Nikon has to be better. They have to do that because if they fall short, they might have a problem, especially since it's a new mount and we're going to be expected to buy new lenses for this new mount or use an adapter to mount the old ones. But a lot of people love Nikon ergonomics and they love the Nikon color. So Nikon color is different from Canon color. Canon color is different from Leica color. Leica color is different from Sony color. You pick your preference and many people start there. So for my needs, low light, fast autofocus, great video, good battery life, a nice EVF. If this new Nikon can do that, I'm sold. I want one. I will be in. So what are your thoughts on the new Nikon teaser? What do you think? Are you going to be interested in it? Are you have no interest in it? Are there other cameras you're waiting or looking for? Let me know in the comments below. And now I want to share my thoughts and memories with you from a Nikon camera of years past that I expected to hate when it came out. My review was the camera I expected to hate, and that camera is the Nikon V1, the 1 series mirrorless, which Nikon came out swinging to compete in the mirrorless arena, only to be laughed at by many because it had a little teeny sensor in it and high image noise is what everybody was saying. So I saw this and it was like $1,200 with a kit lens and I was like, what is this? It's almost a joke, right? It's this little guy. So I bought one to review it and lo and behold, I loved it. I thought at the time, for the time, the autofocus was blazing. The video performance was fantastic. They had that 10-to-100 stabilized lens, which gave you massive reach in such a little package. And the image quality was actually beautiful. It was kind of film-like, but a modern-esque film. If someone released a film today with modern technology, it almost is what that would look like. So I'm going to share some images with you that I shot for a year with the Nikon V1. The camera I expected to hate, but ended up loving and owning 3 of them. I even gave one to my son a couple years ago. He still has it. I bought the 32 f1.2 lens. I had other lenses for it. But let's go over some of those images and see that Nikon color and Nikon quality in a little teeny sensor. So imagine what this new camera is going to be with this big fat sensor. So let's take a look at these images from the Nikon V1.
Wow, it's been nearly 7 years since the Nikon V1 since I reviewed it. Time has flown by, but here's some images from it using various lenses. This is a 7-year-old small sensor camera, keep that in mind. But the color quality, the quality of the images to me had something special about it. And yes, you could get shallow depth of field either using a lens like the 32-1.2, I think that's what it was, or even adapted lenses. But the crop factor was insane. The crop factor was ridiculous, but it did not take away the fact that this camera had some cool rendering to it. Here's one of my dog Baby, my Chihuahua Baby, using that 32 f1.2 wide open. It was a small, solid camera. It felt great in the hand. It was simple in the menu system, very fast autofocus, decent video capabilities. Look at the black and white rendering. It looks lovely. This was with a super ultra wide lens. I can't remember offhand what it was, but I do have fond memories of the Nikon V1, and this was their first serious attempt at mirrorless. Now keep in mind, 7 years ago, but look at the image quality. It looks lovely. There's no taking away from it. And here's some of that shallow depth of field at f1.2. But 7 years ago, Nikon came out with this in hopes to say, wow, look at our mirrorless camera system, and it was panned by almost everyone. But some of us out there in photography land appreciated it for what it was. And I even was out there taking images at high ISO that looked pretty damn nice. And I was using it at ISO 1600 and even ISO 3200 in a pinch. That sounds low by today's standards, but think of this as 7 years ago, again, in a small sensor. But the color performance is what struck me from this, and that's what Nikon does so well. They have their own unique color style. Some love Nikon, some love Canon, some love Leica, some love Pentax, some love Sony. They all offer different colors and different renderings, but this old Nikon V1 to me kind of looked like film in a way, almost if like a new film was created. That's how this sensor rendered to me. And you know, I looked at my old photos of this from years ago, just making this video, and the curiosity got me. I went to Amazon to see if you could still buy one of these, and lo and behold, you could still buy them new or refurbished for very little money. I was thinking about buying one again just to have as a travel camera and say screw it to all these big expensive models, because I'm looking at what I do here and I have captured great memories of my family, my pets, my life, my travel, and they lack nothing for me. They're not any less beautiful than they would be shot on a $5,000 camera. So for $300-400 I can buy one of these today, either new or refurbished, and have that little, fast, solid, and there it is. There's my son with the V1 I gave him. I think that was the 10-30 zoom. He had the microphone on for video. He loved it. He still has one, I think. But yeah, these images all look great in my opinion. So the new Nikon mirrorless, the new Pro mirrorless, the full frame, I'm expecting it to have fantastic image quality, that Nikon look like you're seeing here, superb low light due to that big sensor. I hope it has really fast autofocus. I hope it has amazing video. There's Brandon with my mom in a mausoleum. I hope the new Nikon has great battery life, great ergonomics and control, and I hope it has a really nice EVF. I hope they don't skimp out on that EVF. Even the Sony a7 III has a decent EVF, but it's nothing like what we see in the Leica SL. Imagine if they had that Leica SL or better EVF in the new Nikon Pro mirrorless camera. Those are things they're going to need to do to overtake Sony. They're going to need a superior EVF. They're going to need just as fast, if not faster, autofocus. They're going to need just as good, if not better, video. They're going to need decent, good battery life. They're going to need a better design. They're going to need a lot to surpass Sony, because Sony already has done so much with the mirrorless camera game, I'll call it. Sony has been out there for years already. The A7, the A7 II, the A7 III, the A9, they've matured their mirrorless product line, and today they have very little weakness, and there's a reason the A7 III has been sold out for months and has a 4 to 8 week waiting list to get one. So I'm really rooting for Nikon, because competition is good in the camera industry. Things have been getting a little boring in my opinion over the last couple of years. A little slow, you know. We have new updates from camera companies such as Sony, and new DSLRs from Nikon, and mirrorless to me and to many and to the sales reports is where it's at. Mirrorless sales are up, DSLR sales are down. So I'm rooting for this Nikon, and then the new Canon is coming as well, but I have to tell you, I'm kind of feeling like the Nikon's going to be a more attractive option. I don't know, I've always preferred Nikon cameras to Canon when it came to their DSLRs, so I think I'm going to prefer a Nikon mirrorless over a Canon mirrorless when it comes to these bigger pro bodies. Here's a shot from the V1 with depth of field. I was using some cheap $30 lens adapted that was a fast prime. This is shot with that f1.2. Looks good. Again, the Nikon V1 was and is really a fantastic system. Here's one I caught of Debbie, total candid. She was laughing and the V1 was fast enough indoors to nail focus and capture that moment. Here's one with that cheap lens I wrote about at the time to get shallow depth of field on your Nikon 1 series camera. Now Nikon came out with the J1, the J2, the J3, the V2, the V3, the AW1, which was the all-weather, I think that's what it was called, I could be mistaken. But for me, the best of the bunch was that Nikon V1 because it had the built-in EVF, and the others did not. You had to add that wart that mirrorless cameras were stuck in for so long, adding that external hump that would fall off all the time. So the V1 had that built-in viewfinder. It had a solid brick-like feel. Again, that simple menu. It had a great LCD. The battery life was great. It had slow motion video. It had that 10-to-100 zoom that offered a really nice range right out of the gate. It had image stabilization in that lens as well. So here's another one wide open at f1.2 on that V1. So you can get shallow depth of field. So I just wanted to share with you guys some old memories, some old photos, and I thought it was literally 3-4 years ago that this camera came out, and when I looked at the date of the review, it was November of 2011, which blew my mind because holy cow, those 7 years have flown by. But looking at these, and there's a reflection of my son and nephew. My son looks so much smaller and younger in these. That's because he's now 7 years older. Here's one of my nephew using lighting. This was a high-key portrait, or I don't want to say high-key, a high-contrast portrait, and the V1 did very well. This was my son's hair curling up from the humidity. We were in the mountains of Kentucky, near Harlan County, Kentucky, and it was so hot and humid. This was through a window. We were eating lunch, and this lady was conversing with her grandson, and I just liked the look of it. There was even some dynamic range going on here 7 years ago. Here's a self-portrait I took trying to be creative in the mirror, and I just drug the shutter and moved the camera a little bit. The V1 was really making me want to go out and use it. Here's one of an orangutan at the zoo, almost like a staged portrait. Like he's like, okay, take my picture, and that's a she, not a he, I'm sorry. Here's one up in the mountains of Kentucky, the 32-1.2. Lovely shot. The V1 also did black and white very well, close to like a monochrome, to be honest. Here's one of Debbie in our old backyard before we remodeled everything. And this was probably with one of the kit zooms or something. Here's one of our cat Boo back then, who's no longer with us. You can see her face there on the left looking out of the door, and that reflection, there's a reflection of the glass. Here's one at a tattoo convention, and this is the last one. So thank you guys for watching. I am excited about the new Nikon. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this video, thumbs up and subscribe. This is Steve Huff from SteveHuffPhoto.com.